It all happened in that moment when their two hands touched. "Get away from this child right now," she cried out, and then my mother-in-law stared at her grandchild as if she had seen something terrifying. My son Joseph is 5 years old, but this is the first time he's meeting his grandmother Patricia. As if an electric current had passed through her, Patricia quickly withdrew her hand. Of course, neither my husband nor I had any idea what was going on. What on earth did she mean by getting away from Joseph? They had just met for the first time, and I even thought it was terrible for her to say such a thing. My husband tried to calmly ask for a reason. "Mom, what's wrong? Did Joseph do something? Don't you two feel anything?" Patricia said, ignoring our panic. What could she be talking about? After letting out a short sigh, she said, "This child is currently the target of strong malice." Strong malice. My husband and I looked at each other. Who could be directing such malice? "I don't have any idea," I said. As I was mulling it over, my husband suddenly got up. When he returned after a while, he was holding a laptop. Could it be this person? He opened the laptop in front of Patricia and played one of the videos. Patricia stared intently at the screen. I thought she wouldn't be able to tell anything from this, but Patricia's eyes widened. It's this person. There's no doubt that this is the source of the malice. Then Patricia started muttering something concerning. "My name is Ashley. I run a bakery with my husband Pete, and today the shop is busy as usual. From early morning, we make sandwiches, arrange freshly baked bread, and do a quick clean in front of the store before opening. When opening time comes, customers arrive seeking freshly baked bread. While enjoying light conversation, we introduce seasonal recommended breads, and the customers' faces light up, saying, 'That looks delicious.' Now we have more regular customers, and I'm very happy to be able to talk with them. I, too, was once just a customer visiting this bakery. As I frequented the place, I found myself attracted not only to the bread but also to the owner, Pete. That's how we started dating and decided to get married. When we got married, he said, 'Actually, I'm divorced. I divorced my ex-wife when I quit my job to start the bakery.' I felt that he must have very bitter memories as he spoke, seemingly forcing the words out. She said she didn't like the financial instability. But I chose to have my own shop. We talked and worried a lot about things like the possibility that he might prioritize the shop over family in the future, or that he might not be able to help much with childcare, but we still decided to be together. It's okay. We'll definitely manage everything somehow," I said, taking his hand and smiling. After that, we also went to greet my mother-in-law Patricia, and we registered our marriage. Both Pete and I were full of happiness, believing we could overcome anything that might come our way. My mother-in-law, despite her advanced age, lives alone in the countryside, separate from our home. According to Pete, Patricia is said to have strong spiritual sensitivity, so being around many people tires her out. I don't have any spiritual sensitivity and can't feel such things, so I don't really understand. But according to Patricia, sometimes it's happier not to be able to sense these things. So, my mother-in-law has a desire to live in nature, and both my husband and I respect that opinion. Even if I'm not nearby, I'm always watching over you in my heart. That was Patricia's catchphrase. Though I found it a strange thing to say, somehow it made me feel reassured and dependable. My husband and I were blessed with a baby boy the year after we got married, and we named him Joseph. Watching our son grow day by day is the most joyous thing. Even the smallest daily changes make me want to take pictures of everything. There was a bit of loneliness as he gradually became more independent, but I suppose this is how he'll continue to grow up. By the time Joseph turned 5, he had become quite a talkative child. However, he occasionally says odd things. He would happily wave goodbye to people passing by, and then say things like this to people we met in the park: "Hey, someone's riding on you." This was to a person who always walks their dog in the park, but no one was riding on them. Also, while we were at the supermarket during checkout, he confused the cashier by asking, "Who are you piggybacking?" Joseph says these things with an innocent smile, which makes the other person look even more uncomfortable or puzzled. When I told my husband about this, he was very surprised. Maybe he's inherited Mom's gift. Maybe we shouldn't let him talk like that too much in public. We can't really control what he says at kindergarten, but we tried our best to not let him talk much outside. However, there's a limit to what you can do with a 5-year-old child. Our child has a somewhat mysterious air about him, even though he's our own. If he's inherited your mother's gift, couldn't we get some advice from her? Joseph has never met Patricia directly. When Joseph was born, there was a severe infectious disease going around. Now that seems to have settled down quite a bit, and we were thinking of consulting Patricia soon. While we were worrying about Joseph's chatter, we began to notice some changes in my husband's bakery as well. It wasn't that bread sales had improved or that it had become popular and interview requests were coming in. Sadly, defamatory posts began to appear on social media. There were bad reviews saying things like, "The bread is soggy," "The sandwiches smell bad," or "The owner's attitude is poor." This had Pete holding his head in his hands. "We always serve freshly baked bread, so why? And was my attitude really that bad?" He vented his frustrations while drinking a cold beer at night. Whether because of these posts or not, it seemed that customer traffic was declining. Of course, we also use social media to post about seasonal recommended breads and announce campaigns. And there were customers who came after seeing these posts, and we were gradually increasing our customer base until this happened. In this age of social media dominance, customers stop wanting to visit shops based solely on online posts. It's not like we'll immediately have 0 customers, but this isn't good if it continues. We wanted to turn things around somehow. One day, as I was cleaning in front of the store and preparing to open, I found a garbage bag placed in front of the shop. I picked it up, wondering what it could be. "What's this?" Praying it wasn't dangerous drugs or poison, I looked inside and found it was just ordinary household garbage. Why would someone dump ordinary household garbage here? Who would do such a thing? "Ashley, what's wrong? Did something happen?" Seeing me frozen in front of the store, my husband came over. When I told him about the dumped garbage, Pete looked puzzled for a moment. But he quickly smiled and said, "No need to worry about it. This is how we deal with this kind of thing," he said, throwing the garbage bag into the commercial trash bin behind the store. "Is it really nothing to worry about, as my husband says?" As I stared at the trash bin, I had a feeling that something bad was going to happen. A week later, garbage was dumped again. This time, there were 3 bags, and the smell was terrible. Even Pete frowned at this. As he threw the 3 garbage bags into the bin behind the store, he grumbled, "We're not a garbage dump." After that, garbage bags were dumped several more times, and just as we were getting fed up with it, other strange things started happening. For some reason, Joseph suddenly started crying at night and trembling in fear. "I'm scared." Joseph would wake up in the middle of the night, come to me, and start crying. This had never happened before, so why now? When I asked Joseph, "Did you have a scary dream?" he just shook his head and kept crying with his face buried against me. "Don't come here. Go away." Both Pete and I stayed with Joseph until he fell asleep. That night, after Joseph had fallen asleep, my husband was drinking beer and deep in thought when he muttered, "If this keeps up, let's file a police report." However, we had already thrown away the garbage, and we hadn't heard of anyone seeing someone dumping it. There's also the problem of whether the police would take action without any evidence. After discussing it, we decided to install a small security camera outside the shop to monitor the situation. By this time, perhaps due to the defamatory posts on social media, customers had become sparse. Sales weren't coming in, and my husband seemed discouraged. I wondered how I could encourage him when he was so down. The only consolation was that our regular customers still believed in us. Let's cherish the people who care about us more than those who attack us. Your bread is the best in the world. Right? Have confidence, I said, patting my husband on the shoulder. You're right. All right, shall we try some new menu items? As if his previous gloominess was a lie, Pete began to enthusiastically brainstorm bread ideas. His eyes were sparkling like a child engrossed in a craft project. I loved seeing that face of his. Back when we first met, he would talk on every date about, "It would be nice if there was bread like this, or bread like that." With a sense of nostalgia, multiple ideas scribbled on memos spread across our living room table. As if mocking our efforts, an incident occurred a week later. This time, graffiti had been painted on the walls of our store. There was an illustration of a character I'd seen somewhere before, and next to it was written, "Nasty bread," and other such things. The troubling part was that these were painted with actual paint and didn't look easy to remove. People passing by were surprised and seemed shocked. Our store faces the street, so while there's a lot of foot traffic during the day, there's hardly anyone around at night. As a result, no one had seen the person who did this paint graffiti. Pete kept his mouth tightly shut, his face grim. He clenched his fists, frustration evident in his expression. I felt frustrated and helpless too. No matter how much they dislike my bread, there are things you should and shouldn't do. Although a figure was visible on the security camera, it was dark, and due to the camera angle, the face wasn't clearly visible. Pete decided to file a police report and have them investigate. When we find the culprit, they won't get off easy, Pete fumed. But strangely enough, after that, there were no more incidents of garbage dumping or graffiti. Perhaps the culprit noticed the security camera while they were in the middle of painting the graffiti. If so, it's possible that the same person was responsible for the garbage dumping as well. While the pranks had stopped, the defamatory posts online continued. Shortly after that, on a day when our shop was closed, Patricia called Pete. "The shop is closed today, right?" "Yes, but what's up?" "I became worried about you all. Can I come visit?" Both Pete and I were surprised. This was the first time my mother-in-law had asked to visit us on her own initiative. For some reason, I'm just terribly worried. The reason was mysterious, but we had no objections. When we told her that, Patricia took a series of trains to come to us. My mother-in-law arrived around 3 p.m., and my husband and I greeted her with smiles. Patricia was smiling too, holding a gift of sweets in her hands. This would be the first time she and Joseph met. Joseph isn't usually shy with strangers, but he was fidgeting a bit with Patricia. Maybe he sensed something. Seeing Joseph's behavior, Patricia smiled gently and said, "Hello, Joseph. I'm your grandmother." Joseph hid behind me as if to say a stranger had come. He stared intently at Patricia, assessing the situation. "It's our first time meeting, isn't it?" "Oh, I have a gift for you." As she said this, my mother-in-law held out the sweets she was holding. Seeing the box of sweets, Joseph's eyes lit up. He happily said, "Ah," and reached out his hand. Because we had been cautioning Joseph not to speak much in front of others, he had stopped pronouncing words properly in front of anyone other than Pete and me. This habit came out even in front of Patricia. "I'm sorry. He still can't speak well," I hurriedly explained, as I always do to people outside. I felt ashamed and apologetic for giving the same explanation even in front of Patricia. I thought she might say, "He's 5 years old and still can't speak. What kind of education are you giving him?" But Patricia didn't seem to mind and handed the sweets to Joseph. It was at that moment when their two hands touched. As if an electric current had passed through her, Patricia quickly withdrew her hand. "Get away from this child right now," she cried out, and then stared at Joseph as if she had seen something terrifying. Of course, neither Pete nor I had any idea what was going on. What on earth did she mean by getting away from Joseph? It doesn't feel good to be told such a thing. I even thought it was terrible for her to say that. Why would she say such a thing? However, while flustered, we tried to calmly ask for a reason. "Mom, what's wrong? Did Joseph do something? Don't you two feel anything?" Patricia said, ignoring our panic. What could she be talking about? Looking at Joseph, touching him, talking to him, what is there to feel? Of course, we feel joy at his growth and happiness at having him nearby, but judging from Patricia's demeanor, that's not what she meant. She might be referring to something spiritual, but we're completely clueless. "You two really are blessed," she said after letting out a short sigh. This child is currently the target of strong malice. Strong malice. My husband and I looked at each other. Who could be directing such malice? I don't know who it's from, but it's malice from a woman. It's like a curse. Do you have any idea who it might be? Who could harbor such strong resentment? A kindergarten teacher. I'd like to think there's no such person among our friends or customers. As I was mulling it over, my husband suddenly got up. When he returned after a while, he was holding a laptop. Could it be this person? He opened the laptop in front of Patricia and clicked on one of the files. There were several security camera recordings saved there. He played the video showing the person who had done the paint graffiti, and Patricia stared intently at the screen. It was dark outside, and the person was wearing black clothes and a black cap, so their outline wasn't clear. They were small in stature, but that alone wasn't enough to determine if it was a woman. I thought she wouldn't be able to tell anything from this, but Patricia's eyes widened. It's this person. There's no doubt that this is the source of the malice. As I stood there dumbfounded, Patricia started muttering something. Isn't this Sarah? Sarah? Her? Pete looked at Patricia with disbelief. Who is this Sarah? It's my ex-wife. Why now, of all times? How do you know this person is Sarah? I can tell by her aura. I felt as if I had stepped into a drama. So these things really do happen. I was so stunned that I couldn't close my mouth. Patricia took a small scented bag out of her purse and handed it to Joseph. It had a sweet smell. This is a charm. It will deflect the malice, so keep it with you. I was skeptical internally, wondering if such a thing would really work. But Joseph held the scented bag up to his eye level and nodded very seriously. After that, we chatted with Patricia about recent events and had some tea. During this time, Joseph remained silent, tightly gripping the scented bag and not letting go. A few days later, the situation took a sudden turn. Within days of my mother-in-law's visit, we received a call from the police. According to the police officer in charge, they had identified the culprit behind the paint graffiti and the defamatory posts on social media. After ending the call, my husband said dejectedly, as expected, the culprit was Sarah. Both Pete and I were shocked. It was now confirmed that the person captured on the security camera was indeed Sarah, just as Patricia had said. But why would she do such nasty things to this store? From what I'd heard from Pete, Sarah had married another man after divorcing him. That man was supposed to be wealthy, so it didn't seem likely that she would still have lingering feelings for Pete or his store. I don't understand either. Anyway, I'll talk to you properly about it tonight. Since the call came during the day, we focused on running the store. I couldn't help but think about Pete's ex-wife. Maybe she was trying to break up our family. Such thoughts crossed my mind. It was a relief that I could temporarily forget about Sarah while serving customers. That night, after Joseph had gone to bed, Pete told me what he had heard from the police. Sarah and her husband couldn't have children. Sarah had apparently confessed about herself during the police questioning. She had apparently been undergoing fertility treatments, but couldn't conceive, and her relationship with her in-laws had become strained. Being told things like, "When are you going to have a child? You're a useless wife," Sarah gradually lost her confidence. Being told such things must have been incredibly stressful for her. Around that time, Sarah apparently learned through the grapevine that Pete had gotten married. Pete guessed that a mutual friend must have told her. From that friend, Sarah must have also heard about our son. Unable to have a child herself and going through such a hard time, she couldn't understand why Pete was happy, and she unilaterally built up resentment that led to her actions. That's just plain jealousy. To think that for just that reason, she had been writing defamatory posts and vandalizing with paint graffiti. It's terrifying to think that someone could be so envious and hateful. At the same time, I felt a little sorry for her. Surely Sarah too wanted to have a child and live happily with her partner. It's not really anyone's fault. Whether or not one can conceive a child is, as they say, known only to God. I feel sorry for Sarah, but we've been inconvenienced too. The cost of removing the graffiti and the damage from the defamation are significant. My husband declared that he would properly claim compensation from her, just as he had said he would. I'm sure Joseph was scared too. As he said this, he downed his beer in one go. That's right. Joseph too had been the target of this one-sided malice, to the point where it was called a curse. I can't forgive this either. If Patricia hadn't come, Joseph would probably still be afraid and unable to sleep. Thanks to the scented bag, Joseph can now sleep as he did before. The faintly sweet scent seems to be calming Joseph down. If there was anything to worry about, it was whether there would be retaliation from Sarah, or if we would be cursed even more. When I consulted Patricia about this, she surprisingly laughed and said, "There's no need to worry about that." Why not? Once you curse someone, you receive many times that curse in return. So Sarah would soon have the curse returned to her, and she wouldn't be able to curse Joseph anymore. I had very little involvement with these kinds of things, so I gave a rather flat response. In any case, if nothing else happens, that's for the best. We found a trustworthy lawyer and filed a claim for damages against Sarah for this incident. We didn't know how she would react. Maybe the defamation and vandalism of the store would get even worse than before. It was terrifying to think that it might not stop at just graffiti. While we were watching the situation with such anxieties, surprisingly, the compensation was paid immediately. According to Pete's friend, Sarah's husband and his family apparently put up the money. Whether it's because they're the type to care about how others see them or not, they seem to have dealt with it promptly, fearing scandal. Since then, there have been no defamatory posts on social media or pranks on the store. We breathed a sigh of relief. Also, we heard that Sarah and her husband divorced after this incident. Apparently, Sarah's husband and his parents couldn't tolerate her behavior. They probably couldn't forgive her for defaming and vandalizing the store of her divorced ex-husband. Shortly after, Sarah was hospitalized. Whether it was for mental illness or some other ailment, that's not clear. I even think that, as Patricia said, some sort of curse might have rebounded on her. There's a saying about karma, and I guess this is what it means. If you hold a grudge against someone, it comes back to you. Even for someone like me who can't sense spiritual things, this became a chance to believe in it a little. We've started to listen to our son's out-of-the-blue chatter without being confused. As for Patricia, she ended up moving in with our family. Given her advanced age, we were uneasy about letting her live alone. At first, my mother-in-law was hesitant, but Pete succeeded in persuading her. For the first few days after moving into our house, she seemed unsettled, but after a week, she appeared to have adjusted. I wonder if I can manage in a bakery where so many people gather, she had said. But now, as if those words were a lie, Patricia relaxes in the back of the bakery. According to her, the customers are all good people, and she doesn't sense any malice. That's why she can spend her time peacefully. By the way, my mother-in-law had another hidden talent. She could apparently predict the near future of people or animals she met. It seems to be something like fortune-telling, and she says she can tell by sensing their aura. If you try to see, you can see it, she says, laughing like a witch. When my mother-in-law whimsically told something to a regular customer, it actually came true. Mother-in-law, what exactly did you tell them? You see that girl in the suit over there? I told her she's about to get a promotion, so she shouldn't quit her job and should keep working hard. Indeed, that woman is a regular customer who always buys sandwiches to go. She might be in sales, as she always carried a bag full of documents. But lately, I had noticed she looked down. A few days later, she came skipping to Patricia. Just as Patricia had said, she had really been promoted. That's not all. To a person who stopped by the store while walking their dog, she said, "Your dog is suffering, so take it to the hospital." The owner was puzzled, but the next day, the dog started suffering and a disease was really discovered, surprising both the owner and me. After several such incidents, Patricia quietly became popular as the fortune-telling grandmother. But it's troublesome if too many people gather. I'll just talk occasionally. So, my mother-in-law's fortune-telling became a special menu item only for regular customers. Perhaps because of this, the store regained its prosperity. Seasonal menu items are increasing daily. Pete is bringing to life the ideas he had been jotting down one after another. Meanwhile, Joseph has regained his energy and returned to being a talkative child. Having Patricia nearby and playing with him is probably a big factor. "Grandma, there's someone over there." As expected, he points to empty spaces and speaks. Patricia responds to each of Joseph's observations. She teaches him to distinguish between living things and non-living things. It feels like Joseph's ability is gradually becoming controllable as he spends time with Patricia. He no longer suddenly points at empty spaces when we go out. Even the cashier at the supermarket we often visit now smiles at him. Seeing Joseph chatting happily with everyone, both Pete and I feel relieved. I think these ordinary days will continue like this from now on. And I believe that no matter what difficulties arise, we can